Wife's friends tried to destroy my marriage. I destroyed them. Instead, my wife came home from girls' night and handed me a written list of 10 non-negotiable changes her friends demanded I make. Or she was leaving me. What she didn't know was that I'd been recording every conversation in our house for the past month. Let me back up to explain how I got to the point where I was secretly recording my own wife. 3 months ago, Sarah started coming home from her weekly girls' nights with increasingly specific complaints about our marriage. Not the usual, "you never help with dishes" complaints that most couples have, but weirdly detailed critiques that sounded like they came from a relationship textbook written by someone who hated men. If you're into honest stories about relationships, trust, and betrayal, hit that follow button. You won't want to miss the next one. Marcus told me that in healthy relationships, the man initiates romance at least 3 times per week, she said one Tuesday, completely out of nowhere while we were watching Netflix. Marcus? I'd never heard of a Marcus in her friend group. Who's Marcus? He's dating one of the girls. He has a psychology degree, so he knows about these things. Red flag number 1. Since when did my wife need relationship advice from some random dude I'd never met? But it got weirder. A few days later, Marcus says that men who don't have clear 5-year financial plans are showing signs of emotional immaturity. Then, Marcus thinks couples should maintain separate social circles to avoid codependency. And Marcus believes that traditional gender roles in marriage are a form of systemic oppression. DeMarcus. Marcus. This guy I'd never met was apparently giving detailed analysis of my marriage based on what my wife was telling her friends about our private life. The breaking point came last month when Sarah announced she was going to a relationship workshop that Marcus was hosting for the friend group. She'd be gone all weekend, learning about healthy relationship dynamics and recognizing toxic patterns. She came back with a notebook full of notes and a completely different attitude toward our marriage. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. But not just regular wrong, it was psychologically wrong, emotionally damaging wrong, systematically oppressive wrong. That's when I installed the voice recorders. I know how that sounds. I know what kind of husband that makes me. But something about the way she was changing, the clinical way she'd started analyzing every interaction we had, made me feel like I was living with a stranger who was building a case against me. I put tiny digital recorders in the living room, kitchen, and our bedroom. The kind you can buy on Amazon for $20. I told myself it was temporary just until I could figure out what was really going on with my wife. What I discovered was so much worse than I'd imagined. The first recording that made my blood run cold was from a Tuesday night when Sarah thought I was asleep. She was on the phone with someone, and based on the conversation, it definitely wasn't one of her female friends. "I know it's hard, but you have to trust the process," a man's voice said. I'd cranked up the volume on my laptop, listening through headphones in my office at 2 a.m. Breaking down his resistance is going to take time. "He's starting to push back on some of the suggestions," Sarah replied. "Yesterday he asked me why I was suddenly so interested in relationship psychology. That's normal. Men like him are threatened by women who start thinking independently. He knows he's losing control." Men like him. What the hell did that mean? "I just feel guilty sometimes," Sarah said. "We've been together for 8 years. He's not a bad person." Good people can still be toxic partners. The fact that you feel guilty for wanting better treatment shows how deep the conditioning goes. Conditioning? Treatment? They were talking about me like I was some kind of abusive monster, when the worst thing I'd done recently was leave dishes in the sink overnight. "Marcus, I know you're right, but..." "Sarah, we've talked about this. You can't let emotional attachment override your logical assessment of the situation. What did you discover when you went through his phone last week?" My stomach dropped. She'd gone through my phone? "Nothing really. Some texts with his friends about football and work stuff. He's not cheating or anything." "That's not the point. The point is that he's emotionally unavailable. His priorities are work, sports, and himself. Where do you rank on that list?" "I don't know." "Exactly, and that's the problem we're solving." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Marcus systematically picking apart every aspect of our relationship and Sarah agreeing with his analysis like a student taking notes from a professor. But here's what really got me. Marcus wasn't just giving advice. He was giving instructions, specific things for Sarah to say to me, behaviors to watch for, ways to document my problematic responses to her new demands. This week, I want you to implement boundary number 7, Marcus said. Tell him that he needs to start contributing more to household emotional labor. How do I explain what emotional labor is? Use the examples we discussed. Make him acknowledge that you're the one who remembers birthdays, plans social events, maintains relationships with both families. Make him admit that he's been taking your emotional contributions for granted. And if he gets defensive, document it. Write down exactly what he says, how he says it, what his body language looks like. Men like him reveal their true nature when their privilege is challenged. Kernel. I sat in my office until 4 a.m. that night, listening to recording after recording of these phone calls. Hours of conversations where my wife and this Marcus character dissected my personality, my behavior, my worthiness as a husband. And the most disturbing part, Marcus was coaching other women too. Sarah wasn't his only project. How's Jennifer doing with the financial independence plan? Sarah asked during one call. She opened her own bank account last week. Her husband doesn't know yet, but she's been transferring money for the past month. What about Lisa? Lisa's situation is more complicated. Her husband actually started couples therapy like she asked, so we had to adjust the approach. Adjust the approach? This wasn't relationship advice. This was a systematic campaign to destroy marriages. The recordings revealed that Marcus had been working with Sarah for months, long before she started coming home with all her new relationship theories. He'd convinced her to start documenting every argument we had, every time I disappointed her, every moment I failed to meet standards I didn't even know existed. Remember, the goal isn't to fix the relationship, Marcus explained during one particularly chilling conversation. The goal is to make you realize that the relationship can't be fixed. Some men are capable of growth. Others are too set in their patterns of privilege and control. How do I know which category he's in? You test him, you make reasonable requests for change, and see how he responds. If he gets angry, if he deflects, if he tries to turn it around on you, then you have your answer. Reasonable requests, like the time she'd asked me to start journaling my emotions every day and share the entries with her. Or when she'd insisted I needed to apologize to her for invalidating her feelings after I'd suggested we couldn't afford a vacation she wanted to take. Every test had been designed to make me fail. But the recording that changed everything was from the night before she handed me that list of 10 demands. Sarah was on the phone with Marcus and she sounded upset. I don't think this is working, she said. He's actually been trying to make some of the changes I asked for. What kind of changes? He's been doing more housework without being asked. He planned a date night last week. He even bought me flowers for no reason. And how does that make you feel? Confused. I thought you said men like him don't change. They don't. Not really. What you're seeing is temporary performance improvement motivated by fear. He senses that you're pulling away, so he's trying harder. But it won't last. What if it does last? What if he's actually listening to me? Sarah, we've been through this. You've already done the work to identify the fundamental incompatibilities in your relationship. Don't let a few romantic gestures erase months of emotional neglect. But maybe, listen to me. Marcus's voice got firmer. Tomorrow night, you're going to give him the list we prepared. All 10 non-negotiables. If he's really changed, if he's really willing to do the work, he'll agree to all of them immediately and start implementing them. And if he doesn't, then you'll have the proof you need that this relationship has run its course. The list, I'd been wondering where that had come from. 10 specific demands that range from reasonable, help more with household planning, to ridiculous, attend weekly therapy sessions focused on unpacking my male privilege, to completely insane, write a letter of apology to every woman I'd ever dated for any harm caused by my emotional immaturity. Marcus hadn't just helped her write the list, he'd designed it to be impossible to agree to. But I had one more card to play that Marcus didn't know about. See, I'm not just some random husband who got outmaneuvered by his wife's manipulative friend. I work in digital marketing, which means I'm pretty good at online research. And Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd given Sarah his real phone number. It took me less than 20 minutes to figure out who Marcus really was. Social media profiles, LinkedIn, public records, the whole digital footprint. Marcus Thornfield, 34, recently divorced, currently in a bitter custody battle with his ex-wife, who'd gotten a restraining order against him for emotional manipulation and psychological abuse. But that wasn't the best part. Marcus wasn't just giving relationship advice to my wife. He was running a whole operation, a private Facebook group called Women's Awakening Collective, with over 200 members, where he positioned himself as a relationship expert, helping women recognize toxic patterns and reclaim their power. For a fee, of course. Sarah had been paying this guy $150 per session for relationship coaching. She'd been secretly transferring money from our joint account to pay for advice on how to leave me. But here's where Marcus had really screwed up. In several posts in his Facebook group, he'd shared detailed stories about his clients and their breakthroughs. Stories that were clearly about Sarah, Jennifer, Lisa, and other women he was coaching. Stories that included enough personal details to identify the women and their husbands. Stories that violated every possible privacy and ethics standard for anyone claiming to be a relationship professional. And Marcus wasn't a licensed therapist or counselor. He was a divorced guy with a bachelor's degree in business who decided to monetize his own failed marriage by convincing other women to sabotage theirs. I spent the next week building a complete dossier on Marcus and his operation. Screenshots of his Facebook posts, records of the payments Sarah had made to him, audio recordings of their phone conversations, evidence of his restraining order and custody issues. But I still hadn't decided what to do with all this information until Sarah handed me that list of 10 demands. She stood in our kitchen that Friday night, looking like a prosecutor about to deliver a closing argument, and watched me read through the most insulting, ridiculous set of relationship ultimatums I'd ever seen. "These are my non-negotiables," she said when I finished reading. "If you want this marriage to work, you need to agree to all of them." I looked up at her. This woman I'd loved for 8 years, who'd apparently been plotting my emotional destruction for months with the help of a predatory con artist. "All of them?" I asked. "All of them. No negotiation, no compromise, no gradual implementation. You agree to do all of this, or I'm done." I folded the list carefully and set it on the counter. "Can I have 24 hours to think about it?" She looked surprised. Marcus had probably told her I'd either explode in anger or start desperately trying to negotiate. 24 hours, she agreed. The next morning, Sarah went to her usual Saturday yoga class. As soon as she left, I got to work. First, I called Jennifer, Lisa, and 3 other women whose names I'd heard in the recordings. I'd found their contact information through the same online research that had led me to Marcus. "Hi, Jennifer. This is Sarah's husband. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think we need to talk about Marcus." 3 hours later, I had 5 women sitting in my living room, all of whom had been paying Marcus for relationship coaching, all of whom had been systematically manipulated into sabotaging their own marriages. Jennifer had been married for 12 years before Marcus convinced her that her husband's lack of interest in her book club was a sign of emotional abuse. Lisa had been happily married for 6 years before Marcus helped her identify her husband's controlling behavior, which consisted of asking her to discuss major purchases before making them. The pattern was always the same. Marcus would identify women who were going through normal relationship stress, convince them that their problems were actually signs of deeper toxic patterns, then coach them through increasingly unreasonable demands until their marriages imploded. "He told me that if my husband really loved me, he'd agree to anything I asked," Jennifer said, tears in her eyes. "So I kept asking for bigger and bigger changes until he finally said he couldn't live with someone who treated him like an enemy. He told me my husband was financially controlling me," Lisa added, "but when I left him and had to pay my own rent and bills, I realized my husband had actually been protecting me from how expensive everything was." All 5 women had the same story: happy marriages that Marcus had systematically destroyed while collecting $150 per session. "What can we do about it?" one of them asked. I smiled and pulled out my laptop. "I'm going to show you exactly what Marcus has been saying about you behind your back." For the next hour, I played audio recordings of Marcus discussing each woman's case with Sarah, him laughing about how easy it was to manipulate emotionally vulnerable women, him bragging about his success rate in breaking up marriages, him discussing which women would be most likely to pay for advanced coaching after their divorces. By the time I finished, all 5 women looked like they were ready to commit murder. "There's more, wow," I said, pulling up his Facebook group. "He's been sharing your personal stories online, names, details about your husbands, your private conversations with him." I showed them post after post where Marcus had shared their most intimate relationship details with hundreds of strangers, presenting their marriages as case studies in toxic masculinity and emotional abuse. "This is illegal, right?" Jennifer asked. "Depends on the state, but it's definitely unethical as hell. And I think we can make sure he never does this to anyone else." We spent the rest of the afternoon planning Marcus's downfall. Sarah came home that evening expecting to hear my decision about her 10 demands. Instead, she found me sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of printed documents. "What's all this?" she asked. "Evidence," I said, "of how Marcus has been manipulating you for months." I handed her a transcript of one of their phone conversations, the one where Marcus laughed about how gullible she was and how easy it had been to convince her that our marriage was toxic. Sarah's face went white as she read. "This can't be real." "It's real. I've been recording our conversations for the past month, including your phone calls with Marcus." "You've been recording me?" "Yup, the same way you've been documenting everything I do to build a case against me." I handed her another document, a printout of Marcus's Facebook post about her, describing her breakthrough moment when she realized her husband was emotionally stunted and sharing details about our private life that she'd told him in confidence. "He shared this with hundreds of people," I said. "Your real name isn't on it, but anyone who knows you would recognize the story." Sarah sank into a chair, still reading. "There's more," I continued, handing her a printout of Marcus's restraining order. "Your relationship expert is a guy who got kicked out of his own house for psychologically abusing his wife. His ex-wife's testimony is pretty detailed about his methods for emotional manipulation." "This can't be true." "It's all true. And here's the best part. 5 other women from his coaching practice are filing complaints against him with the state licensing board and the Better Business Bureau. Turns out, when you're not a licensed therapist, but you're charging people for therapy, that's fraud." I pulled out the final document, a detailed report I'd compiled of all the payments Sarah had made to Marcus over the past 6 months. $1,800, I said. "That's how much you paid him to teach you how to hate your own husband." Sarah was crying now, but not the manipulative tears I'd gotten used to over the past few months. These looked like genuine shock and betrayal. "I thought he was helping me." "He was helping himself to your money while destroying your marriage for entertainment." "What happens now?" I leaned back in my chair. "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Marcus gave you 10 non-negotiables last night. Well, I have 1 non-negotiable for you." I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "You're going to call Marcus right now, with me listening, and you're going to tell him that you've discovered his game. You're going to demand a full refund of the money you paid him, and you're going to warn him that if he doesn't shut down his operation immediately, 5 women are going to file criminal charges against him for fraud." Sarah picked up the paper with shaking hands. "And if I don't, then you can take your 10 demands and find a new husband to terrorize with them. Because I'm done being a project for some con artist's amusement." She was quiet for a long time, staring at the evidence spread across our kitchen table. "I'm so sorry," she finally whispered. "Sorry for believing Marcus, or sorry for getting caught. Sorry for all of it. For letting someone else convince me that you were the enemy. For documenting your behavior like you were some kind of criminal. For making you feel like you had to record our conversations to protect yourself." I studied her face, looking for any sign that this was just another manipulation tactic. "How do I know this is real?" I asked. "How do I know you're not just saying what you think I want to hear?" "Because for the first time in months, I feel like myself again," she said. "And I can't believe what I almost threw away." Sarah made the phone call that night. With me sitting right next to her, she confronted Marcus about his lies, demanded her money back, and told him that his scam was over. Marcus tried to convince her that I'd manipulated the evidence, that this was exactly the kind of controlling behavior he'd warned her about. But when she started reading direct quotes from his Facebook posts about her, he got quiet real fast. "You violated my privacy," Sarah told him. "You shared my personal information with strangers. You charged me money to destroy my marriage for your own entertainment." "Sarah, you're not thinking clearly." "No, I'm thinking clearly for the first time in months. And I'm done being your experiment." She hung up and turned to me. "He said he'd refund half the money." "He'll refund all of it," I said, "or Jennifer's attorney will be calling him Monday morning." Marcus refunded every penny 2 days later. But the real satisfaction came 3 weeks later when I got a message from Jennifer. Marcus's Facebook group had been shut down after multiple fraud complaints. His website was offline, and several women had gotten restraining orders against him after discovering how he'd been sharing their private information online. "He's moving back to his home state," Jennifer wrote. "His business is completely destroyed. Thank you for exposing him before he could hurt more people." As for Sarah and me, it took months of real counseling, not Marcus's manipulative coaching, but actual licensed therapy, to rebuild the trust we'd lost. Sarah had to learn how to think for herself again after months of being told what to feel and how to interpret my behavior. I had to learn how to trust someone who'd been systematically documenting my flaws while pretending everything was fine. But here's what I realized during all those therapy sessions. Marcus hadn't created Sarah's dissatisfaction with our marriage. He'd just amplified it and given her a framework to blame me for problems that required both of us to solve. We did have issues, real ones. I had been taking some things for granted. Sarah had been feeling disconnected and unheard. But instead of talking to me about it, she'd talk to her friends. And instead of getting helpful advice, she'd found Marcus. "I keep thinking about how different things would be if I just talked to you first," Sarah said during one of our therapy sessions. "Different how? We could have fixed our problems without blowing up our marriage. We could have worked together instead of me treating you like an opponent to defeat." Our therapist, a real one, with actual credentials and ethical standards, helped us understand that healthy relationships require ongoing maintenance and honest communication, not secret documentation and ultimatums designed by manipulative outsiders. 6 months later, Sarah and I are still married, still working on things, but working on them together. And Marcus? Last I heard, he was working at a car dealership in Ohio, his relationship coaching career permanently destroyed. Sometimes I think about those recordings I made, how wrong it felt to secretly document my own wife. But then I remember that those recordings probably saved our marriage by exposing the truth about what was really happening. Because the truth was that Sarah hadn't stopped loving me. She'd just been convinced that love wasn't enough, that our marriage was fundamentally broken, and that I was incapable of change. Marcus had taken a woman who was going through normal relationship doubts and turned her into someone who saw her husband as an enemy to be defeated rather than a partner to work with. But here's the thing about the truth. It has a way of surfacing eventually. And when it does, you find out who people really are when the lies are stripped away. Sarah is still the woman I married 8 years ago. She just got lost for a while, following someone else's map to a destination that didn't exist. And me? I learned that sometimes protecting your marriage means fighting for it in ways you never imagined. Even if that means recording conversations, building dossiers, and taking down con artists who prey on vulnerable people. Marcus thought he could destroy marriages for profit. Instead, he just taught a bunch of husbands and wives exactly how much their relationships were worth fighting for. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.